You've just been listening to a press conference by Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, who talked about being livid at the fact that he says he was misled by the officers and about the officers' response to the Uvalde shooting. And we heard him talk about his investigation by the Texas Rangers and the FBI. As soon as that information is gotten, they will give the information to the families about the result of that investigation. He also talked about what strategies, what best practices have to be employed, what mistakes, if any, were made here. He was very strong in his opinion that they should have eliminated the killer and rescued the children. And in response to a question about 18-year-olds being allowed to get a long gun or a rifle, the governor was very clear that in Texas, for the last century and a half, 18-year-olds have been able to get long guns. And it's only in the last decade or so that we've been hearing about school shootings. So I guess that, Greg, I'll start with you. We've got a livid governor, justifiably livid, as I think everyone at this table is tonight, with the fact that we have been misled as to what the facts were.
Well, I think the important thing he said was, and it's something that I said yesterday, is we only get to the scene of the story after it happens, and we should address every variable, every step that gets you to that crime, whether it is mental illness, schools, family, red flags. The fact that he said that this is a new thing in a decade and a half, that kind of points you in the direction of where the answers are. Why are these things happening more and more in this kind of society? Is it something that has to do with not simply the availability of guns, because they have been available, it's social media, it's a decline in education, it's a breakdown of the family. But these are a lot of things that we don't want to talk about because we've avoided these problems for so long. We've avoided these problems for 50 years. I think you could say, you know, the governor is livid, and you could say, well, maybe the police were incompetent, or they were afraid, or they were adherent to a doctrine that prevented improvising. But that is not my place. That's his place. And that is the place for the investigators to let them investigate fully, to tell the story, which is necessary. You need the scrutiny, because there's going to be a next time. And the information you glean from this time will help you in the next time. That's why it's important. And it isn't Monday morning quarterbacking for investigators or law enforcement or family members, survivors, to question these variables. That is entirely their right. However, I feel like as a media, we have to be very careful, because we Monday morning quarterback 5 days a week. And we assume, and it's amazing to me how we all become experts on you know, it's amazing. And I didn't go to school for any of this, but somehow I can have an opinion. So I think be humble, let them do the job, let them talk about what the police did or didn't do, and try to keep again, let the story grow, let the facts pile up.
You know, Joey, the governor was talking about, and the state head of the Department of Public Safety came out and said that the school director, I think his name was Mccraw, made a mistake, and that they, instead of dealing with this guy, Ramos, as an active shooter, they dealt with him as a barricaded shooter. Now, you've got adherence to the chain of command. You're a military guy. You've got parents outside screaming, yelling, being handcuffed, according to some, being thrown to the ground, according to others, or listening to shots periodically through this. Do you always listen to chain of command in a situation where your gut is telling you that there is an active shooter? I'm hearing an active shooter in there.
Well, number one, I'm a military guy, not a police guy. Those two different things.
Well, chain of command is chain of command.
Fair, fair. My reason for pointing that out is not to assume any credibility I don't have on the topic.
Right, right.
So Monday morning quarterbacking or voicing the fact that expectations were not met, those are two very different things. The governor is the chief executive in that state over their law enforcement. It's his job to say, these are the protocols we have. Active shooter is you run to the gun. You go to the gun and you take it out, all right? A hostage situation is very much different. I text Pete Hegseth 48 hours ago and said, man, this looks a lot like they handled it like a hostage situation. That doesn't make sense.
They did.
But I don't know why that is. I don't know what. I was not in that room. I was not in the hallway. I was not in that school. I can't tell you why that is.
We all know that. But what we know now is that children are calling.
What we know now, or what people are saying on
what
television?
we know now, today,
Still all
what we know now is that at 11:35, officers go in. They are being shot at, okay, at 11:35. At 12:16, there's a 911 call, Shannon, and one of the kids says 8 or 9 of us are alive. And at 12:21, there are 3 shots that are ringing out. They've got an active shooter. Why does it go from 12:21 to 12:50 for them to figure out there's an active shooter?
It's a hell of a question. I'd like that answer, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
ahead,
and there were questions asked of these officials. Were the 911 calls being relayed to the commander on the scene? Did they know that? Because if you're treating this as a barricade situation where maybe there are no children alive in that room, it's just the shooter himself, you're going to handle that differently. But when you have repeated calls, and I feel like they're going to release those 911 calls, and it's going to be really hard to listen to them.
Absolutely.
When children are begging, please send the police, and they're in there for 30, 40, 50 minutes, we have no idea what it was like for those kids in there. And we are all furious, and we are all heartbroken, and we always want quick answers because as human beings, we want to try to make sense of this, and we cannot make sense of this. But it does take time to get there. And Greg, as you touched on, we cannot pretend like our society has not broken down at the family level, at the community level, at the church level, that we have done things that have actively ripped those institutions apart and then wonder why when there is a young man who is bullied, who is made fun of, his family is estranged and a complete mess, that he devolves further and further into these online communities where people find toxic relationships and ideologies that they want a sense of self-esteem and a sense of being. And all those places they could have found it before are being ripped away. We cannot act like not examining that and passing a bunch of laws is going to make these young men better. And Charles Krauthammer had a fantastic piece in 2012 that he wrote after the Sandy Hook shooting. I wish he was still with us to make sense of this if he could. And it talks about a culture of violence and how we have just broken things down, and we cannot pretend those things don't matter.
Okay, let's take a listen to the Texas Department of Public Safety director and what he said earlier. I'll get back to you, Harold.
Perfect.
For the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that. But again, I wasn't there, but I'm just telling you, from what we know, we believe there should have been an entry at that as soon as you can. The chief of police of Consolidated Independent School District, he was convinced. And again, I want to go back and say, he was convinced at the time that there was no more threat to the children and that the subject was barricaded and that they had time to organize with the proper equipment. Texas embraces and teaches, the active shooter doctrine. The active shooter doctrine, as long as there's kids, as long as there's someone's firing, you go to the gun, you find them, you neutralize them, period.
The active shooter doctrine, Harold.
So first off, I want to give Governor Abbott a lot of credit. We're in a different party, but for him to stand before the press and answer those questions, real leadership is accountable and shares credit when things go right. And when they go wrong, you're accountable, and I give him credit for that. 2, when he talks about the responses, I think he's talking about 2 responses. The response of the officers on the ground, which obviously was a devastating disaster, a fatal disaster. And then 2, what I think he was equally livid at, I heard in his voice and heard in his words, was that he was lied to by law enforcement afterwards. So I understand, and we can all accept at a painful way how mistakes can be made. And I listened to that Mr. Mccraw there say that this officer commander foolishly, wrongly thought that this was a barricade situation. But once you leave there, one thing the chain of command is consistent with, if you lie to your superiors, if you mislead your superiors, everyone that lied to the governor and the police chief and the mayor should be fired immediately. Number 1. Number 2, this is a public safety conversation that has to happen. And we always try to say we want to take politics out of things. You can't take politics out of things. We are all political beings, and we have to just accept that there's a modicum of that in the conversation. So we got to talk about schools and what has to happen. You touched on it yesterday, Judge. There are 8 schools in that district, we learned, and there are 4 security resource officers. That needs to change. The question around minors and mental illness and whether or not, we've had mental illness in our society forever. We've had evil since the introduction of mankind. Australia has evil, but they haven't had a mass shooting since 1996. Do we look at what other countries are doing? I think we have to put all of that on the table. But I was most impressed with this press conference because the governor and the mayor, this has all been in 2 or 3 days here. In 2 days, they have They let facts guide this conversation. And the response on the scene, a disaster, a fatal disaster. And what I'm equally, if not in a weird way, more disturbed by is that it seems like law enforcement then lied to the governor and lied to the police the Texas Department of Public Safety leader and lied to the mayor. And that is not only fireable, I've got another place in my mind where those people are reserved for as well.
Well, all right, Joey, I'm going to go back to you now. With respect to the hardening of the schools, we now know that the teacher opened the door at 11:27. At 11:28, there's a crash, and she runs in to make a 911 call at 11:30, and then she doesn't go back and close the door. And then what is crazy about it, Joey, is that he then jumps a fence with a long gun, they say an AR-15, and a bag of ammo, and he shoots at the school before he even gets into the school. They call the school resource officer. He drives by. Maybe he didn't see the guy, but then doesn't go back to the school.
No, I think the last thing I heard, and that's my biggest problem with even being on live TV talking about this, is whatever we say and talk about right now, something's probably going to change it tomorrow. And that's what's bothering me so much about this, is why can't they get their ducks in a row? And it's probably because a lot of people are sitting there looking at the severity of this massacre, probably with their initial instinct trying to cover their own tail.
That's exactly right.
And probably changing the narrative of what happened in their own minds to the point they believe it. And that's part of the problem with this resource officer. Listen, when I went to high school, and he may be a fantastic police officer now, but we called him Barney Fife because that was the presence he had. All right, and why? Because you're putting him somewhere that you don't think matters, because you're out there catching drug dealers and murderers on the streets, and the school's a safe place. Well, that's changed. That's not the posture we need anymore. I don't know anything about the school resource officer there. I believe there were 4 officers for a district of 8 schools. I do know that they usually put priority on high schools rather than elementary schools. These are all things that have to change, but they're all things that should have changed years ago. And you're talking about a rural area. We had, I believe it was a Texas state senator on Fox and Friends this morning talking about frustration, or it might have been the mayor. I believe it was the mayor talking about frustration. If they need certain types of resources, say guidance counselors or mental health counselors for students, they have to go to San Antonio. They have to go to places 20, 30, 50 miles away. These are all things that have to be addressed. And just back to the security of the school, from my understanding, it was an awards day. And that's why security was lax as far as entering and exiting the facility.
Earlier that morning, right.
And if that's the case, common sense says you bring in more officers. You ask for more physical persons.
Yep. And the crazy part about it, Shannon, is that apparently 2 months before, they had active shooter training in that school district for the lower school, the middle school, and high school.
Yeah, and there was a posting on Facebook at some point that the Uvalde SWAT team had gone around to local businesses and schools and didn't want people to be afraid. Say, you're going to see us in our full gear. We're coming so we can learn the layouts of these places. So if something like this happens, we're ready to go. That's the #1 question I have, is why the Uvalde SWAT team was not there. By all the accounts we've heard so far in these press conferences, they were not a factor. If they were in that community, had the ballistics protection equipment and everything that they needed, and they had done drills and they had checked out these schools specifically for this, that's my #1 question. I hope the governor will get the answer to, where was that SWAT team? Why did it have to be a Border Patrol team that showed up that ultimately, and they were even held off for a while, that had to force their way in?
You know, I may be wrong, Shannon, but my understanding is when one of the school teachers called her husband, who was at a barber shop, wasn't he a border guy? He borrowed a rifle. It wasn't even his. From the barber shop, went in himself and shot.
No, he got his dog. He's got his wife and his son out.
Got his kids out. So why did he get in? And yet we've got 21 people, as I think. We've got 19 cops in the hallway from 12:03 to 12:50, Greg. 19 cops. Kids are bleeding out while that is happening.
Well, you know, I admit, you know, when I hear about a terrible tragedy, like for me, for the longest time, it was Flight 93. And you always run through your head. You don't have to do this, Joey, because you're in the military. You've been in these situations. But, like, you know, I'm in my head asking me, like, what would I do? What would I do at the Bataclan or at the Pulse nightclub if I was there? You think that you will react one way, but you don't know. I'd like to think I would do amazing things, and I would charge in there and kill the killer and rescue people, but you don't know what happens to your brain, even if you're being trained for this. So, I mean, we're coming down pretty hard on law enforcement, and maybe they deserve it. But then again, we're not the experts here. So I would just urge people. Like, we don't even know what's the difference. How do you know the difference between an active shooter situation and barricading situation as we're criticizing that?
Well, if you're
How do
still-
they
I'm
know the
gonna
difference?
give you a hint. You're still getting
I'm going to give
911
you a
calls.
hint. The bullets are still going.
And the 911 calls are still coming in of people that you know are alive.
But Greg, I hear you, and I don't like the Monday morning quarterback. This is what this guy's trained to do.
Right.
I mean, no one shows up at the Gutfeld show and say, I want to host this show. I think I can do it.
A few people have done that.
There are three guys in the city who try to do it as well as you want on the West Coast, and they don't because you do it well. You expect police officers. Now we talked about a case where a guy got out of jail because he escaped with a prison guard, and he checked out because they didn't make him sign the note that morning about where they were going.
Right. Yeah.
You have one failure, and you have a cascading of things. We saw, Greg. I agree with you, but I got to tell you, if it's my kids. I know we all can talk big. The only guy really here that's actually acted big is Joey here. But if I saw someone on a subway, I got to think if I saw a woman being raped like it was in Philadelphia, I'd throw myself in front of her. I do know this. If my kids are put in harm or put in danger, you can put a bullet in my head.
That's right.
A bullet, a gun, 2 guns, 3 guns, and an AR-15. I don't care what it is. I'm
on
going
this
in.
topic specifically, though,
So that's what I hear you, Greg. I hear, but I think in that regard, not to cut you off.
I understand that. I am not trained as an expert to rip them alive on the news.
We're not ripping them alive.
But just them. I'm just saying just them. These guys here.
Go ahead, Joey.
Multiple types of law enforcement agencies were involved in this. All right, it is absolutely true. You have to identify an on-scene commander and let them have that authority. Otherwise, you have people
have a command center, exactly.
Exactly. So that much of it, I understand. I don't know what made them believe that it was safer for the kids in the room to stay outside the door, but I 100% believe they acted on that notion.
Okay.
But
what about
and that's the answer I want to know.
What about when the cop said, if you need help, yell help, and one of the kids said, when that kid yelled help, that kid got shot?
I have a question about
right.
I have a question about that because I wondered I wondered if it was the killer himself pretending to be the cop. There's so much that we don't know, and unfortunately, these babies who survived this are the ones who are having to provide that information.
Do we know how many kids got out, Shannon?
I don't think we do. Listen, the school had more than 600 kids, so they were breaking out windows and taking kids out from other parts of the school, although those officers, and I'm with you, Greg. Listen, my late father was a law enforcement officer, so the last thing I want to do is cast any aspersions. I'm just asking questions. That's it for now. And my father would have asked the same questions.
But look, but Governor Abbott, the police union building in my congressional district is named after my father. I'm a huge supporter of police officers across the country. The second part of this, Judge, to your point is, I understand you can have the wrong reaction with the right intentions at any given situation. But once the situation is over and you lie about it.
You're 100% right.
That to me,
100%.
That to me is what makes some of this unforgivable.
A mistake does not negate integrity.
That's the problem.
Exactly. All right. Texas official Stephen Mccraw getting emotional during the press conference earlier. Take a listen.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Forget how I'm doing. What about the parents of those children? Forget about me. What about me or officers and stuff like that? We take an oath to uphold the law and protect people.
You know, I used to prosecute child abuse homicides. I never saw cops get emotional or more emotional than they would with these child abuse homicides. One of the things that this governor talked about, he was asked about the difference between background checks and mental health. And one of the things about mental health, and Greg and I, we agree on this, it's just this amorphous blob. We don't know what it means. You can lie on an application. You can say, you know, I don't have any mental health issues. I'm not on any psychotropic drugs. And under HIPAA, the courts, and I used to sign pistol permits, don't have the right to do a check on your mental health issues. Will we ever stop people who are mentally ill from getting guns?
Well, and that's something Charles Krauthammer talks about in this 2012 piece, too. When he was practicing psychiatry, he said it was much easier then if you felt somebody really was a danger to themselves or to other people to get them into a facility and to do it very quickly without a full-fledged adjudication. And some of these facilities across the country have been closed. They're just not available. He said it was much different in the 70s than it was at the time he was writing this in 2012. The mayor also this morning talked about the fact that they desperately wanted mental health facilities there in Uvalde. They don't have them, like Joey was saying, that they have to go cities away. He said they had donated 7.5 acres for facility to be constructed there. They were excited. The community was supporting it. And then they were told they had to raise $26 million. And he says our poor little community didn't have it, so they had to abandon the plans for the mental health facility.
Yeah. Tough stuff. We're now hearing that, Joey, there was a digital footprint, more than we thought, that he was buying guns, he was in chat rooms. He had indicated in 10 more days something was going to happen. That, along with some of the other crumbs that we heard about, he was self-injuring himself. He had violent rhetoric at the job that he had. He was bullied because he had a lisp and he wore eyeliner. I mean, there are all these little crumbs, but nothing that really amounts to a point where police can actually intervene.
One of the biggest problems, this is a ATF Form 4473. It's multiple pages. This is what you have to fill out. This is the background checks that certain people want to be universal. All right, you can fill that out, and it gets sent off to a government agency. It's only as good as the vetting of the government agency, which is only as good as the reporting of the local agency, whether that be school police officers, whether it be county sheriffs or city police. That form and that process is only as good as the judge that decides we're going to dismiss this because you're a minor, or the DA that says we're not going to prosecute this because this is going to ruin your life and we think you deserve a second chance. All of those things have to be on board before any other regulation on how we check people's background is effective. So we can broaden the gun transactions we add background checks to, but we still need to fix the background check, which goes all the way to what we've talked about for months, which is, should we prosecute criminals? Should we worry about their record if they've done a violent crime? Go study the Navy Yard. 4 violent incidents, 2 of them involving a gun. None of them made it to the point that they went on a record. So he went and not only did one of these and got a gun, but got a top secret security clearance.
Amazing. Yeah, 5 pages. Before I go to break, quickly.
This is why we may need a longer wait period, and we might need to put more people in charge of this to investigate these things and give judges like you the authority that you did not have years ago.
If you tell me that a wait period makes this more accurate, I'll be on board.
Well, you were unique, Judge. If everyone looked at it like you, we might not have this.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.